There's a rhythm to each combat encounter in Sekiro. The sword fights in the game have often been likened to a dance, with each parry part of the beat you're moving to. It's such a difficult game, but so rewarding when you get it right, when you match your dance partner step for step. There's something else about Sekiro, however, which resonated with me more than any other title that From Software have put out, and it took me years to recognise what it was. It took until I was fighting in a local fencing tournament to figure it out. If you're not familiar with this series of games made by From Software, they are third-person action games where you swing all manner of sharp and spiky implements at enemies. The format of the Souls-like is thought to start with Demon Souls, released in 2009, and continued in various guises, with the most recent being Elden Ring, releasing in 2022. Players run through gauntlets of interconnected levels populated by various malcontents. These gauntlets are often punctuated with boss fights that really test a player's skill and determination. Whilst Demon Souls, Elden Ring and the Dark Souls series allow for the player to pick from any number of weapons and magical strategies, Sekiro and Bloodborne are two entries that constrain a player's loadout to suit their mechanical overtures. On the one hand, Sekiro can be quite defensive. Its mechanical conceit is observing enemy attack patterns and parrying in time with their strikes to lower their posture and deliver a final death blow. On the other hand, Bloodborne rewards a more offensive approach where you can recover health by continuing the attack. After being a big fan of Demon Souls and Dark Souls, I found it quite strange that I couldn't get into Dark Souls 2, 3 or Bloodborne. There was something about these three games that I kept bouncing off. Something hadn't clicked. On the other hand, when I played Sekiro in 2019, I was hooked. Something about this felt different entirely. I couldn't put my finger on what though. By this point I'd written quite a few video essays for this channel. I enjoyed doing them. I like celebrating the interesting things that games and their developers do. And I relish the idea of writing about Sekiro. The problem is I couldn't figure out what to write about. Maybe I could talk about it like a rhythm violence game, borrowing the mechanical customs of games like Thumper and Crypt of the Necrodancer. I got disillusioned by this approach. It didn't feel interesting. It's readily observable how elements of rhythm games are part and parcel of this combat system. What's the value in pointing out the interactive similarities across genre? Sure, it shows us the value of the setting and aesthetic style of a game to completely change the experience a player is having. In thinking about genre, I went so far as to read up on a theorist called Hans Robert Jauss and the horizon of expectations, but still it fell short. This line of inquiry on genre never felt like enough. So after 4 attempts at writing this video essay, I stopped and moved on to other things. Cut to several years later, and I'm at a regional fencing tournament in Derry, Northern Ireland. By no stretch of the imagination am I a good fencer, but I'm enthusiastic and I've been at it for the guts of a decade. About halfway through the tournament, I'm fighting better than usual. I'm pushing my opponent towards the end of the piece so they'll be forced to attack me, at which point I can parry and counterattack. And that's when it hits me. My fencing style is incredibly defensive. I rarely go on the attack. I try to put my opponents in a position where they attack me and I counter. I might make the odd extension to get a cheeky wrist hit, but that's it. If only it was just in fencing, but it extends to Kendo too. I've only started Kendo within the last couple of years, but it has much more of an emphasis on being on the offensive and continuing the attack through your opponent. I've recently started free sparring, and my instructors have both said that I will need to work on my tendency to sit back and wait for my opponent to move. I'm a defensive sword fighter, but it's actually more than that. Years ago, my fencing coach pointed out that it's not just in sword fighting that I'm defensive. For as long as he's known me, that defensive nature extends into who I am as a person. Quiet in groups, I wait for someone else to do the speaking, overthinking and hesitating on taking action at times, being patient and waiting for an opportunity rather than making the opportunity for myself. I am, by nature, rather introverted and defensive. It's not a bad thing, and it's not something that can't be changed or developed, but it's where I'm comfortable. So what does this subject of who I am got anything to do with Revelations on Sekiro? It all comes down to play. There's a vast field of studies surrounding play, looking at it from the realms of developmental psychology, philosophical musings, sociology, and cultural anthropology. It's a form of behaviour we can see in animals as well as humans. It's an innate part of being human. The oldest civilizations all had board games that they took everywhere. To quote Joseph Levy, to play means to accept the paradox of what is at once essential and inconsequential. We can understand play in 100 different ways and still not come up with a definition that's all-inclusive of its many facets. We can understand it in opposition to work being something we might enter into begrudgingly out of obligation. Whereas play is joyfully approached, we might also do the same repetitive tasks during play, but the friction of a system or person opposing us turns it into a challenge we aspire to surmount. We play to learn, to have fun, to build relationships with others, to challenge ourselves, to interrogate our own beliefs, to become fighting fit. But what's important for our purposes here is to understand that play comes from us and is a part of who we are. Or to put it another way, from the beginning, play is a symbolic act of representation in which human life presents itself. For me, when I load up any game from the Civilization series, I get in a pattern of spreading out cities and then sitting in like a turtle and going for the cultural victory. Putting together a run on Monster Train, give me those units which can build up an ungodly amount of shield. This defensiveness makes me gravitate towards Sekiro more than any other From Software game. Both you and your opponent have a posture bar. By holding the button to defend, you can soak up attacks to learn the patterns and your own posture bar will fill. If it is filled completely, your posture will break and you won't be able to defend for a bit. That visual indicator of your own posture is important to know how much longer you can stay on the defense and when you'll have to either retreat further or spring the counterattack. By attacking your opponent, their own posture bar will fill slowly, but it will fill faster when you parry their attacks with the right timing. When it's filled completely, you can perform a death blow finisher, completely ending the fight. With Sekiro, I get to play how I want to. I get to observe attacks relatively safely from a distance, count the timing, and match that. It gives me plenty of opportunity to learn, feel spectacularly, then try again. Looking back on why I bounced off both Dark Souls 2 and 3, I specifically tried loadouts that were different from how I actually like to play. Dual wielding, no defense, rushing at bosses, it just never suited me. It's good to get out of your comfort zone every now and then, to try something different, but when you're playing a difficult From Software game, it can be prudent to keep a cool head and make sure you're enjoying yourself. What I found when I played Elden Ring was that I gravitated towards a simple sword and shield combo. From then on, the whole game just made sense to me. I could express myself how I wanted to. On the other hand, Bloodborne feels alien to me because it rewards that aggressive playstyle that I find so difficult to embody. There's no shield to soak up attacks, it's all about interrupting your opponent's attacks at the right time, constantly being on the front foot. There's something called the regain mechanic, where if you lose health to an enemy, you can get that health back by successfully landing hits on them. You're rewarded for constantly taking those chances. Maybe with more kendo practice and learning to run through people like a freight train, I'll come back to Bloodborne a changed fighter. Does this mean all Bloodborne players are lunatics because the game is constructed around playing offensively? Of course not. We are bound by the mechanics afforded to us by developers, but mechanics are far from the only draw for players. The setting, the story, the very feel of the game are all distinct reasons for us to fall in love with games. What I've personally relished over the past few years is the proliferation of parry-based mechanics since Sekiro's release. Whilst they do their own thing, the likes of Nine Souls and Clair Obscur have great implementations of the parry mechanic, which reward players for their observation and taking that chance. This video has been a long time in the making, percolating for years in the back of my mind. Whether I'm thinking about games or making games, it's always important to bring it back to that fundamental core in the medium. Play is the thing, and you always bring a bit of yourself to the dance floor. Thanks so much for watching. I'm making more videos about practicing game design, so if you'd like to watch the first one on Labyrinths or be notified when more release, then click on the subscribe button.